Okay, this is Math 2, Unit 9, Whiteboard Review, the last page, number 16 through 21. We're going to factor these, which means we need our diamond, and I multiply the first term times the last term and get 28x squared. My middle term goes at the bottom. On a previous video, we already figured out what numbers multiply to 28x squared and add to 11x. That's 7x and 4x. Just to check, we do 7x times 4x is 28x squared. 7x plus 4x is 11x. On the left, I'm going to be factoring by grouping. On the right, I'm going to factor by the area model. Okay, your first term and last term stay the same. Your middle two terms come from your diamond. We're going to split and find our greatest common factor. The greatest common factor between 4x squared and 7x is x. And I get 4x plus 7 inside. The greatest common factor between 4x and 7 is just 1. And I get 4x plus 7 inside. That means my answer is 4x plus 7 times x plus 1. The x plus 1 comes from x and 1 in front of each set of parentheses, which were my two greatest common factors. To factor by the area model, you put the 4x squared in the top left, the 7 in the bottom right. You're still using the 7x and 4x. And then there are some different things we do to find the outside, but you want to look for your greatest common factor. So this one's easy to see because they both have 4's and they both have x's. So this is 4x. You could try 2, but if you had a 2 over here, you wouldn't get to a 7, so that would be difficult. So 4x times what gives me 4x squared? 4x times x. 4x times what gives me 4x? 4x times 1 gives me 4x. X times what gives me 7? X. Well, x times 7 is 7x. And is 7 times 1 equal to 7? Yes. So I still get 4x plus 7 times x plus 1. Your answer here comes from your outside of your area model. Number 17. Start with your diamond, multiply your first times your last, you get 24y squared. On the bottom is negative 11y. Numbers that multiply to 24, we did this on the opposite side as well, I believe. 24 and 11. Nope, that was 24 and 10. So in this case, I want it to add to 11. And I want it to be negative 11. So if I need to add to a negative but multiply it to a positive, both of my numbers need to be negative. A negative times a negative is positive. A negative plus a negative is a larger negative, or a more negative number. So this is negative 3y and negative 8y. Write your first and last term. Minus 3y minus 8y plus 4. Split them and group. The greatest common factor between 6y squared and negative 3y is 3y, and I'm left with 2y minus 1. Greatest common factor between negative 8y and positive 4. Always check if this first term is negative, we're going to take a greatest common factor of a negative number out. So negative 2. Divide each of these, negative 4 is my greatest common factor. Negative 4. Negative 8 divided by negative 4 is a positive 2. Positive 4 divided by negative 4 is negative 1. So my answer is 2y minus 1 times 3y minus 4. going to factor using the area model on the right hand side. In the top left I have 6y squared. In the bottom right I have positive 4. These two numbers come from my diamond, so negative 3y and negative 8y. I want to look for the greatest common factor. My greatest common factor between 6x squared and negative 8y is 2y. The greatest common factor between 6y squared and negative 3y is 3y. And you want to check 3y times 2y. Is that 6y squared? Yes, it is. 3y times what gives me negative 3y? Negative 1. 2y times what number gives me negative 8y? Negative 4. And negative 4 times negative 1 is positive 4. So that works, which means my answer comes from the outside, which is 2y minus 1 and 3y minus 4, which is nice because those match. You can solve either way. You do not need to solve both ways. Alright, same thing. Diamond, multiply your first times your last. This gives me 30. This should be a b right here. 30b squared. So that gives me 30a squared b squared. And at the top is, or at the bottom is negative 11ab. Your terms right here should be AB and AB. They should match the bottom. Should be exactly the same. Because if they add up to the bottom, they have to be like terms with the bottom. What numbers multiply to 30 and add to negative 11? If it adds to a negative number and multiplies to a positive, they both need to be negative numbers. So negative 5 and negative 6 multiply to positive 30 but add to negative 11. And this is what our grouping looks like. A squared minus 5ab minus 6ab minus 30b squared. Remember, we changed that to a b squared instead of a y squared. You're going to split. Greatest common factor here is a, and I'm left with a minus 5b. Greatest common factor here is negative 6, b, because they each have a b, and I'm left with, well, let's check, because sometimes it's hard to see. I divide by negative 6b. Negative 6 divided by negative 6 is 1. B divided by b cancels, and I only have an a left over. Negative 30 divided by negative 6 is negative 5. And b squared divided by b is b. Does my a minus 5b match? It does. So my answer here is a minus 5b times a minus 6b. I'm going to factor using the area model on the right hand side. Same exact problem. First term goes in the top left. Last term, 30b squared, goes in the bottom right. This negative 5ab and negative 6ab need to both be used. A times a is a squared. So I already know those two values. A times what gives me negative 6ab. Well, I already have an a, but I need a negative 6 and I need a b, so negative 6b. I already have an a here, so I need a negative 5 and a b to give me negative 5ab. Negative 5 times negative 6 is positive 30. B times b is b squared. So that checks out. These two give me my answer, which is a minus 5b times a minus 6b and they match. A shipping box in the shape of a rectangular prism has a volume of 2x cubed plus 7x squared plus 5x. What are the factors that can represent the possible dimensions of the shipping box? Remember, volume of a rectangular prism is length times width times height. We learned that last semester. So, I need three things that multiply together to give me this trinomial. That means I'm factoring it out. Number one, greatest common factor. Always look for your greatest common factor first. I know we did not do it on these problems. Please check for your greatest common factor between each binomial, and you'll see that it equals 1. So you can't factor out more. But in this case, I do have a greatest common factor because all of them have an x. And between my coefficients, it would be a 1. So my greatest common factor is 1x. I divide that out to the front, and I'm left with 2x squared plus 7x plus 5. Then I need to factor this trinomial, which means I use my diamond. 2 times 5 gives me 10x squared. The bottom goes 7x. It needs to multiply to 10 and add to 7. That's 2x and 5x. So when I'm factoring this trinomial, you can use the area model and do 2x squared in the top left and 5 in the bottom right. I know 2x and 5x need to go into my diagonals. So the greatest common factor in this row is 2x. 2x times x gives me 2x squared. Greatest common factor here is 5, and you can check that because x times 5 is 5x. 2x times 1 is 2x, and 5 times 1 is 5, which means this factors to 2x plus 5 times x plus 1. And remember, my greatest common factor of x goes out in front. When you're factoring by grouping, you should do 2x squared plus 2x plus 5x plus 5. And you're going to split this into two terms. Greatest common factor here is 2x. Greatest common factor here is 5. So you're still going to get 2x plus 5 and x plus 1, but the x is still out in front. That means my three different dimensions are x, 2x plus 5, and x plus 1. You can write these in any order, but they all need to have those values. These last two are error analysis problems, which means you are finding what went wrong. I'm just going to solve it correctly so that I can see what went wrong. So I want to multiply the first times the last, and I get negative 80x squared. And then the positive 2x goes down here. The factors of 80 are 1 and 80, 2 and 40, not 3, 4 and 20. Five and 16, not 6, not 7, 8 and 10, and not 9. All right, the only ones that are 2 apart are 8 and 10. So in order to get a positive number, I want my bigger number to be positive. So that's negative 8x and positive 10x. So I'm going to factor by grouping to x squared minus 8x plus 10x minus 80. I split these. My greatest common factor is x, and I'm left with x minus 8. My greatest common factor here is 10, and I'm left with x minus 8 again. So x minus 8 and x plus 10 is my solution. Notice here, they got a positive 8 and a negative 10. So you want to tell me something about how they got the wrong number. Well, if this was a negative 8 and a positive 10 from my negative 8 here and my positive 10 here, then they chose the wrong two numbers when they were using their diamond. So please explain why they chose the wrong two numbers and how you could choose it correctly in the future. On 21, find and correct the error made. When we're multiplying, we multiply our base times our height. 2x plus 4 times 2x plus 4. 2x times 2x is 4x squared. 2x times 4 is 8x. 2x times 4 is 8x. 4 times 4 is 16. 2x times 2x, oh sorry, we already did that, sorry. So once we get all of our areas inside, we can add our like terms, and I get 4x squared stays the same. 8x plus 8x is 16x plus 16. So here, they're missing the middle term. So that tells me they just multiplied 2 times 2 and 4 times 4. You can't just multiply your first terms together and your last terms together. You have to multiply to get 4 separate terms and then combine like terms. Or they might have said 8x times 8x, 8x plus 8x cancels each other out. Those don't cancel each other out unless they're opposites. One of them has to be positive and one of them has to be negative in order for the middle to cancel. So those don't cancel. So tell me something about the error they made and how they could do it correctly.